as the Disney Channel salutes the American teacher. Ladies and gentlemen, the First Lady of the United States, Mrs. Barbara Bush.
For the past 25 years, Steve Korpa has taught his students in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania, how to create more than fine jewelry and other works of art. With his patience and artistic touch, Steve has helped many of them give form and shape to their lives.
What I'd like you to do is set a small goal for yourself. What is it that you want to accomplish in the next 20 minutes that we have to work? Visualize that happening. See yourself getting that done. Set a plan, and let's go ahead and get it done. Let's start working. Okay? If I can help you, I'm your man. Let's get started. I'm fortunate to have a talent that I've developed all my life, something I love to do, to draw, to make objects out of metal, to paint, to sculpt, to create. And the most important thing that I do is share that love of doing it with kids. Okay, see if you can get it free. And then scooch it over a little bit. Tape it down so it doesn't move when you use the soldering iron.
I would want him to be my child's teacher, and especially since I would want the best for my own children. He believes in kids so completely. He believes in them to the point that he allows them to make mistakes, and he allows them to go off on their own and do what they really can do. He's never critical of them. He always has the feeling that they've done the best that they can do. And I think that in building self-esteem in kids, it's so much more important than any content that could be taught.
Now, this is real nice. This is
Yeah, I like the way I feel.
He's not like an instructor, he's more of a teacher. What I'm doing, the physical thing is the least important of it. I've learned so much more that's just about being me and being myself. That's a lot farther than actually learning how to, you know, make things or objects out of metal. That's cool, and I like that a lot, but I think that's the under half of what it is.
The object itself always seems to be the center, or the vehicle through which we get to know each other, through which dialogue exists, and I encourage through that object. And the object in the end is not as important as the process. Make two cuts. You know how to cut this out.
Yeah, hopefully.
Cut this straight cut here and then cut that off there. And then do the little cuts. Gouge it down and then grind it. Most kids enter my class with little confidence in their ability to think and ability to create, to make things. What they leave here with is an ability to think, a way to solve problems, literally, physically solve problems in metalworking, which transfers to other ways of critical thinking in their life.
When we're working on something, you have a thing that's called, it's up there, it's goal, plan, action, and result. You set a goal, you plan out what you're going to do, you go through it, and then you get the result. Now that could be applied to me, you know, making a ring out of silver, or it could be, my goal is to get a good job.
He's helped me make stuff, and I don't know, it's influenced my mom to think that, you know, well, if you're that good, you know, take it for a couple more years, and hey, if you like it, go for it. You know, do it in a regular basis, you know, become a jewelry teacher yourself.
When a student tells you that he or she is chosen to somehow model their life after what you do, it's sort of a verification of what it is that you've chosen to do. I mean, that doesn't happen often, but when it does happen, it is a ticket-punching experience. It does say that, in fact, you are getting this thing right some of the time, and it really is a powerful moment when that happens. How you doing? What brings you up to school?
I'm detailing Mr. Borrow's car.
How are you?
Yeah, because I work for Final Favor.
I was just thinking about you a couple of weeks ago, wondering how you were doing. I saw a kid, he stopped to visit, and he said, you know, Corp, I have a house. He's 23 years old and he's married. He said, I own my house because of the things that you taught me about setting goals and plans. Well, what that means to me is the ultimate paycheck to a teacher.
He is there, and people know that he stands for students, and people know that he stands for raising the self-esteem of students.
We had an opportunity to put those beliefs to a true test about 3 years ago when we had a cluster suicide experience here. It was an awful time for everyone here, and people were sort of at wit's end to what to do about the circumstance.
Kids almost spontaneously and naturally turned to Steve. And
by listening to their needs and their wants, he was able to lead them to see that what some of them were hoping would be an expression of a memorial.
We had been working in shop here, making kaleidoscopes, which were tube-like structures, and I thought, what if we took one of these tubes that we're making and soldered one end shut, put a real nice handcrafted lid on it, and then filled those tubes with notes, personal notes from the students who were grieving, and then asked for permission to bury those at the grave sites.
Steve not only helped bring closure to the crisis, but I think it was really like salutary the way that the solution evolved.
He's like a father in school, you know, like somebody you can always go to. Yeah.
All right, class, it's time to clean up. What I ultimately believe, after having gone through this process of, am I an artist, am I a teacher, should I become famous, should I exhibit my work, I had solved that years ago when I realized that my art was really my teaching. From my point of view, what I do in the classroom is my art. And the best examples of my work hang in a permanent collection which is in the minds of my students. A craftsman is a person who follows a prescribed process. And he never deviates from that because it's the proper way to do it. An art, on the other hand, is taking a craft and then using your imagination to ask certain questions. What if? What if I did this? I'll take this past experience and apply this new theory. I think I can do this. And you go about the process of then doing it. There are a group of people in the country who are both artists and teachers, and the work is never separated. One of the things I want to remind you as you start working, you know, we set a goal for ourselves every period. Ask yourself, what is it you want to accomplish this period? How are you going to go about arranging your materials? Make a plan to do that, and let's go ahead and get started, okay?
He's different. He has a different way of doing everything. You mess up, it makes you feel comfortable about it. It tells you that it's okay.
What are you going to do with it? I mean, what's the function of it? Is it something you just look at, or you're going to wear it, or what?
Put some kind of link of a rope on this side, a leather.
Yeah,
hang it.
It's a beautiful piece, so it'll be worn around the neck.
It makes you think for yourself. Yeah, he says he likes the idea.
I just got the greatest idea. It just came to my mind, and I projected it into my life. And I worked at it and put everything I had into it. Came up with the patterns on my own and used what Mr. Korpa taught me about different processes and ideas and how to apply them.
He helps me with my project. He lets me use my mind, my ideas.
I just can't believe how beautiful this thing is, and you got this far without my help. I literally have not helped you with this at all. I mean, this piece you created from scratch.
Mr. Korpa is unbelievable. He takes an idea from the students or one from himself, and he shares his past knowledge with us. As a mentor, I can't describe what he's done for me. With showing me the process of creativity, he's just helped me bring this power to my life. You take an idea and you actually bring it into the real world, and it's something that's indescribable.
The process that I use is see it in your mind, get it in your life. If you can dream it, you can do it. And we use a phrase called, that you're familiar with, we just pronounce it a little differently. We call it imagination. You know it as imagination. But when you say imagination, that says clearly that all of us, what we share in common as human beings is this ability to imagine, to form images in our mind and then project them out into our lives. And that's what makes us uniquely human. This is a fortune-telling device. And what you do is you wind it up, like it's a music box, you wind it up like this, and when it starts rolling, it says, does he love me? Does he not love me? When I have an image and I am inspired to make an object, I create it outside the shop, outside the classroom. I'm working all the time at home, and I bring it in and show it as an example. Remember, this thing's developing. I showed this to you, it took another step last night. You know, it was just a box yesterday. But now it's evolved into a little gun form. But so when you ask me for a hall pass and I don't give it to you, you know, and you start fussing and I just go like that. So, fortunately, it only cries 3 times because it'll make you nuts, I guess, if it kept on going. It does 2 things. First of all, my students see that I'm a practicing artist. Because I'm practicing and making the object, I have a great deal of sensitivity to the problems involved with that. And by making the object, I'm able to short-circuit problems that kids might have with that as well. One of the things that's evolved over the years in the shop is this relatively esoteric teaching technique I call the teaching door. And the door has evolved every year. It changes. It's in progress. It's a work in progress now. But we post things on here. I use symbolism. I have a variety of different silly things. When we get our school pictures taken, I have no use for them except we cut them up and make different funny things. If the kids enjoy this, see these creative approaches to using materials. And then this particular piece here opens up. And I love to make stuff that does things. That talks or goes whack or jumps or tells time. And then this particular piece, this is the perch for my teaching hat. When I have a special lesson that I want to teach and I want to get the kids' attention, you can imagine it certainly would do that because it's so silly, so foolish. I'll put it on for you, as a matter of fact, that this is the front way. And you can see that if you were in my class, when your teacher would put his teaching hat on, you'd just be automatically transformed. Right now, I'm sure you're finding it very, very funny. I know you are. I say to kids that come to me, are in my charge, and I'm responsible for as a teacher, that if you can make a sandwich, if you can find your way home after school, you can create anything you want in your life. You use the same process. Okay, this is my creative stethoscope. When a student comes to me and says they can't or they don't know how, I make a reading using my creative stethoscope. So April is my volunteer because she certainly doesn't qualify for this. She's very, very creative. But when they say they can't, I simply use this. Well, obviously, you can, my dear, so you can go back and think for yourself. That's how we use the stethoscope. I'm in a very privileged position. As an art teacher, as a teacher of a craft, I am not dependent on making work and selling it to exist as an artist. Consequently, my work really is affected in a very positive way. The things that I've shared with you probably would not be created if I had to sell to a marketplace. If I had to make an object, I would pretty much have to choose those objects that I was sure would sell. Consequently, that would greatly influence what it was that I would do and how I'd spend my time. The pieces are so unique and one of a kind, I'm really not interested in mass producing them. But my real work as an artist is in the art of teaching. That's really where my focus is. If there's anything that I'm masterful at and I am really, really dedicated to, it's not making objects so much as it is making children more of who they could be and would be. And having taught for 34 years and taught over 6,000 students in my career, more than 70 of those young people have become craftsmen, goldsmiths, silversmiths, working in the business. But what I'm most proud of is having taught kids who come back to me time and time again and said, Korp, without what you've taught me about how to create, how to bring happiness and goodness into my life, I wouldn't have the house that I have now. I wouldn't have had the college education that I eventually aspired to. Those are the real products that I'm proud of.
because the sun's changing, and I hate to sound like a producer type, but...
Okay, but we have a plan.
Yeah.
Good. I'm rolling, so whenever you're ready.
Why don't we begin?
All right. I'll wait till that goes by.
Go ahead. It's okay.
You sure?
Yeah.
All right, all right. One of the things that I've come to, a version of the truth, is the notion of building relationships with children or whoever you're entered into a learning experience with. I believe that teaching in its core, rather than being instruction, has more to do with persuading than instructing. What I understand now that I didn't know when I first started teaching is that I can't now, nor could I ever, make a child do something. The best that I could do was create a friendly environment in which a child feels comfortable, and then lead them to become more, to become greater. In essence, to intrigue them with my own fascinations. Having said that, that's just not enough. There's more to it, or else everybody that you met in the classroom would be the superb teacher they wish to be. The component that is missing so often is the spiritual component, the one in which deep principles of ancient wisdom that transcend cultural boundaries are learned, appreciated, and most importantly, applied. A quote that has become so important to me by Emerson puts this into a small, short paragraph. The quote goes, "There is no teaching until the student is brought into the same state, condition, or principle in which you are. A transformation takes place. He is you, and you are he. Then is a teaching. And by no unfriendly chance or bad company can he ever quite lose the benefit." I love that. And as in all wisdom, you recognize something in it, in a poetic sense, that the sum total of the words are more than just linear, lined up thoughts. It captures an essence. And that's the essence I want to talk about. That idea that you are brought into the same state, principle, or condition. That's the challenge of teaching. That's the art of teaching. And that's what we'll be talking about in the next few minutes.
Very good.
Thanks.
I didn't know you had a whole lead-in.
Yeah. But that is the notion of principle that we're going to talk about, and Emerson brings that. Because unless you're in the... Now the question is, what principles are they? Who is doing the teaching? Who is it?
Let's go right into that, and then
All right.
do the person stuff later.
Another aspect of the artfulness of teaching that means a lot to me is an area that is rarely ever touched on. In my experience, I always have to qualify that. From what my experience is, it's rarely touched on. It may be touched on by you and others, but from my point of view, it's not thought of very often. That is to say that we are taught when we are becoming teachers. We're taught that all lessons should have an objective. We have to do lesson plans. And it's the typical what, when, where, and why question. But what's never talked about is who. Who is it that's doing the teaching? And by who, I have taken that to mean who philosophically, who spiritually is doing the teaching. And I remember many teachers' room confrontations that were spirited and I enjoyed. My colleagues, several of my colleagues would often refer to the notion that I was philosophical in my approach to questions, as though that was actually a criticism by them. They would say, here comes Korpa with that philosophy stuff again. And I would argue that they had a philosophy as well.
and that the nature of philosophy that, is not necessarily negative. Philosophy, I would remind them, I'm a wordsmith and I love to tear words apart. Philosophy comes from philos sophos, the love of, sophos wisdom. So the love of wisdom is what philosophy is, and if wisdom is knowing what's important, then philosophy defined is the love of knowing what's important. My friends had a view of what was important to them. It very often collided with mine. I'm saying, what I'm suggesting and sharing in my wisdom is that you should have a philosophy. What it is your business, but you need to think about what it is, who is doing the teaching, and then improve on that. That touches on an important notion of mine, which is the really only valid evaluation is self-evaluation. It's nice to know that people think you're doing a good job or have helpful suggestions in an evaluation sense, principals or supervisors or others. But in the essence, in order for you to grow, to self-actualize as a teacher, you need to get a sniff of yourself, to take a look at what you've done and ask yourself a form of one of these questions. What do I want? What am I doing? And do they match when you're with children? What do you want? What do you want to happen? What are you doing? And do they match? And the other one is, if I continue to do what I've been doing, I'll get more of what I've got. Is that really what I want? Not only does that really provide a wonderful context for evaluating your teaching, it also provides a wonderful context for evaluating your relationships and who you're with and how you're growing as a person. It seems like a good place to go into relationships. And one of the things... Yeah. Well, you knew it would not be otherwise. You just drop a coin in the slot and off I go. So okay, so I think it would be maybe what about talking about that relationship piece from where it came from, you know, how it developed. Yeah, the little classroom story. Yeah. Yeah, that fits good here. Okay, one of the things that I realize now more than ever and care about more than one of my passions is this notion of building relationships. Now, that's not a new idea, and certainly it's, you know, there's scores of information available, books on the subject and so forth, but what I want to talk about is this construct of a relationship. I was just thinking yesterday that, you know, I had the family over and it was really nice. A bunch of us were all together, and I was looking at that sort of from the outside, and I realized that this was the core or essence, the jewel in my life built on relationships. And what is that? What is the relationship? And it struck me that in my relationship with my children and with my wife, there is a third component in the relationship. You have me, you have the other, but what the relationship is about is the middle space, the space in between. So it's actually a triad. It's me, it's the child in the classroom, it's my wife, or it's my own children. But really the obligation is to the relationship. You care about the other, and we bring our principles and our notions and our ideas and our ideals about the other to the relationship. But what the sacrifice involves is the relationship itself. You give yourself to the relationship and work on that. That's a rather abstract notion. Many people think that you give yourself to the other. Well, I think that's partially true. But in essence, a teacher gives him or herself to the notion of the learning, which is, in its core, the relationship. It's built on that. To think about where that comes from, after I taught for a total of 35 years. After I taught for around 30 years, the notion or idea of building relationships was becoming more and more difficult. And I picked through the pathology of that and realized that the problems that I was having in the classroom, and I'll only speak of my problems because I only know what my problems were. I won't make generalizations about that. I noticed that there was a steady decline of children who were ready, willing, and able to subordinate themselves to a few simple limits and rules because they had no models in their life that were showing them how to do that. And evidence of that was early in this one particular school year where things changed a great deal for me. Where I had been able to enchant children with really interesting techniques and subject matter. I was an art teacher and I specialized in metalsmithing, so there was a lot of wonderful things that everybody came as equals to that class because there wasn't anybody that came to the class knowing anything about it in the beginning, which I always really liked. It made it simple for me, and so we could all start from the beginning. But I noticed during my, let's say, the 30th year back then, that whatever I had to offer wasn't enough. It was dumb, it was stupid, and kids felt trapped. That was including my best attempts to be friendly and forthcoming, build relationships. And then there was a real negative circumstance one day that happened during a demonstration. And two boys verbally assaulted a girl right during the demonstration. And I was really angry and upset about that. I chose to anger and I didn't know what else to do about it. I was really like nonplussed. I had not had that problem before. And so typically speaking, taking my own advice, I looked at that circumstance, I evaluated it, I picked it apart, and I asked myself, you know, if this is going to be the problem that I have to face, then I have to look deeply into why this is happening and do something about it. And I thought, if not me, who? I'm going to teach them a better way. I'm going to actually put aside the most important notions for a little while in order to teach kids some of the powerful, important notions about relationships. And out of that grew this relationship package that it just changed everything about what I did in the classroom. I had taken what I did, I attempted to take the implied notion of building relationships where I was counting on parents and community to send into my classroom children who were ready to listen and learn. I was now going to have to take care of that with those who were not. Not all of them were that way, but in any classroom, as you know, and if you're not teaching, you'll know soon, there are going to be children there who aren't necessarily ready to learn, who are running an agenda that would be not the one necessarily that you want. And so I started building this idea called building relationships that help us learn and grow together. I used it as a way of teaching how to become more human. So that was the package that I created, and it was built on the notion of a gap between me and my student when we first started. So I'm going to break here for a second. So just to take a second off.
You want a break?
Yeah, just a little swap. Thanks.
Chamomile tea.
Okay, my problem here is I don't know that I'm drifting, but am I holding it together, or can I go back and do something again?
This is very good lead up though. We're not going to have enough time to use it on
Oh no, I know.
online,
We're just
but you know, really this is what teachers worry about the most when they have these kids that are not the agenda. So I'm sure some sentences will pop out. Right.
Well, I want to address that directly. I can say something about that right now.
What to do with these kids.
Yeah.
If that's what they're worried.
Yeah.
They're scared.
Right. Right.
I've been so thirsty since the water went away. Go ahead. It's good. Everybody help yourself.
I know that one of the things that the teachers care about the most is this idea of relationships. In my experience with teaching undergraduates, I did a little bit of my own research here, and out of, say, 300 kids that I've met in an undergraduate circumstance, teaching them classroom management, I'd say virtually all of them want some notion of, in their classroom, being able to be friendly with kids and helping them grow. And they see themselves as wanting to do that. That's really one of the reasons why they want to become a teacher. And this notion that I teach is directly hooked up to the idea of becoming a hero teacher. I believe that each of us have a hero teacher. Those of us, I think that it crosses all boundaries. And when I say hero teacher, it's a capital H and a capital T. That hero teacher does not necessarily have to be degreed or have been in a classroom. It can be anybody that teaches you a lesson that you think is worth knowing and then models it. They just don't say it, they say it and do it. And I think that all of us have had a hero teacher, especially teachers who end up in the classroom, maybe a bit gifted to have several. And the notion that I have is that although reading and studying about technique in helping children become more is important, and I respect it very much, there is a more abstract notion of having a teacher's heart that is founded on your hero teacher. You already know what it is to be a superb teacher. You've had one. You have been the product of one. And I ask you to look at that hero teacher. I ask you to bring that hero teacher with you to your classroom every day. He or she is there, inside you. I'm just saying, recognize that. You don't ever walk in a classroom alone. You walk in a classroom with your hero teachers and the knowledge that you've accumulated and the wisdom that you've accumulated thus far on your journey. But the hero teacher is, in a broad sense, the one person in your life that convinced you that they care about you. That's really the core of who the hero teacher is. Now, they could have been gruff, they could even have been rude, they could have been funny, or they could have been less than forthcoming with conversation and had a special notion of some sort. But there was something about them that convinced you that they believed you were important and that you had a special gift or talent. That's the notion that I'd like you to bring forth when you're in the classroom, to become the hero teacher to others. As a matter of fact, towards the end, I just would say to my kids that I intend to be the best teacher that they ever had. And I asked them to think about their hero teachers. And out of respect to their hero teachers, rather than just say that I was going to just overcome them and become more than them, I would ask them politely, picture your hero teacher in your mind right now. I know you have one. Just ask them to move over a little bit. I'm coming in. Just make some space for me, because I intend to be there. And when you introduce yourself like that to children, you begin to become who they hope you will be. They all hope that you're going to be that great teacher that they'll always remember. What happens after the first day or even the first moments, very often we start behaviors that children sort of spiritually roll their eyes back in their head and say a version of this. Another rude adult I'll have to overcome. A hurdle I'll have to get over, rather than somebody that is really, really nice and I won't take advantage of. And there is the key question. I know what you're thinking. You want to be all that. You want to be all these things, but you don't want to be taken advantage of. And I would simply say to the class, because I had lots of stuff that I knew I was going to share with them, I would say, yeah, I want to be a hero teacher. I want that. I want you to learn and grow, and I want you to challenge me, and I want to learn with you. But I have to tell you something that's really important to me. Please don't ever mistake my kindness for weakness. Don't ever do that. I will not tolerate injustice. I will not tolerate ugly kinds of behavior that hurt others. I stand against that. So don't mistake my kindness for a sort of weakness or an unwillingness to act, because what we're going to be here is something greater and better. So having said that now, you have to have a way of incorporating those notions and ideas. And what I addressed from the very beginning, because I now believe that that's the most important thing, I really now know that I wouldn't teach anybody anything of any value if I if I didn't have some kind of relationship that something would go off their mind and it would say, yeah, this sounds important. It's coming from him. If he believes it, I should pay attention to it. They can still make up their mind, but I need to be in a position as a teacher to persuade, to convince, to have the opportunity to show a better way. I can't make them do it, but chances are if I'm in a position of trust, they'll say, okay, I think I'll give it a try. They never say it out loud. They say it in their behavior. And a mantra that I used my last 5 years of teaching, and I needed it, the mantra that I used again and again was, if not today, maybe in May. If not today, maybe in May. When a kid would be reluctant or not necessarily ready, I would convince myself that to remember that it's a process. So many teachers see an unfortunate event, a mean-spirited gesture, as an event in time that has to be solved immediately. Let me stop right here and say that if it's a physical thing, if there's an assault, then the child hops over all the system, and you've got to get them out of there because your first responsibility is safety. The child, though, is choosing that in the context of please don't hurt each other, no violence and so forth, as you begin to set your agreement and your rules together. When a child violates that, you've got to stop that and move right away. But other than that, don't have them make you do what I used to call the pencil dance or the bad language dance, or they know they are skillful even at 4th grade, 3rd and 4th grade. They've discovered things that'll turn a teacher's buttons on, and when they know that and they don't like you and they want to get out of there, they'll dance, they'll make you dance. So, just have a way to help the child. We discussed that. We've got ideas here that could help you with that. But in general, make sure that, in essence, you're building a relationship that will have something to do with the way a child can change and become more.
Okay, now, need a break?
No, I'm okay. I have to stop because just towards the end I forgot where I was going.
Right, yeah. I think it's a good, you know what you were saying, what sort of started this was that they want to know what to do.
Mm-hmm.
And maybe you could explain the concept of the social skills.
Yeah, social compact starts with that.
Yeah. Short clips too. Now some of this you're not saying as teachers all the time because I think we might be able to use pieces of this in the parenting piece.
Okay, well, what would be helpful?
I like that he's addressing the
okay,
okay.
All right, but then maybe later we could just get him.
If you at some point just give me a sign to stop, if you want to take, I can. But I mean, if I'm missing a point or if I'm going in a place that you think I should, just stop me and I'll redo it right at that point.
No, I think it's going to fit into
all right.
Nice topical.
Well, there's so much of it, you'll have a lot to pick from.
Yeah.
So, and then we're really, the notion here is, this is really important to me, I'm going to talk about that. And what we're really talking about, what I'm really talking about in the relationship is this idea of reciprocity, the idea of a quid pro quo. I love this idea. I think that my full understanding of it more recently is adding to the richness in my life. The idea of a quid pro quo, something for something, really talks about what a relationship is. It's nice for people to be altruistic and make claims to be spiritually gifted and wanting to help people and all that stuff. That's a nice thing, and I think that's good. But I'm going to speak for myself, being more honest. When I'm in a relationship, I got to tell you, I have some expectations. I expect some stuff out of it. I'm just not in it just to give all the time. I have some ideas about what I want in return. And that implies a contract. That implies an agreement that's never made. In certain kinds of relationships, let's take marriage, for instance. It's not even implied, it's explicit. It's called the wedding vows. I mean, you just said what you're going to be and what you will and will not do, and it is said in front of others and it has a reason. There's a reason for that you say and make an oath in front of others to each other. It doesn't list every one of the behaviors, but it does imply that in this relationship you've forsaken all the possibilities to stay in this one relationship. Well, you know, those ideas or notions are all around us. There are contracts that are written between employers and employees, lenders and borrowers. That's a classic example. It'd be nice if I could walk into the bank and say, I'd like to borrow $100,000 because I want to build a house. And the man across or the woman across the desk says, oh, we're glad you came to us. Here's $100,000. Please pay it back. And then you walk out with $100,000. Well, that's just not the way it is. It's even funny when you think about it. What you must do is sign your intention. And they also want to know, in fact, as a reciprocity, what you have to offer that is at least worth something in case you don't keep your end of the bargain up. They can come snatch it. You know, you're going to give it up. So it's a quid pro quo, something for something again. And what I discovered is this idea that, and this covers all my teaching experience, that there is an implied obligation in the learning compact, that students are getting, in whatever way you can evaluate it, whether it's great or not, or whatever the circumstance is technically in the teaching context. That's not what I'm talking about. I'm talking about when a student comes into a classroom, no matter what the grade, no matter what the classroom is, there is an implied obligation that he or she has to subordinate themselves to the common good, to just stifle themselves a little bit, not to do anything they want to do. In other words, there is this implied agreement against anarchy, that when you come into a space, a classroom place, or wherever 2 or 3 people gather, that there is an order that's needed in order for anything to get done. And for so long, I was a giver or teller of rules. I told my class, you know, here, and that wasn't bad. I mean, it was, you know, we needed to have some rules, and I expedited. I say, here's the rules. And mostly everybody would say, well, you know, okay, or they wouldn't say anything. And they mostly all stayed within the rules. Then, like I said, in the last 5 years, this idea or notion where kids felt no sense of obligation, no sense of giving themselves to an idea or principle greater than themselves. They'd do anything they want, anytime they want. And that was really where we needed to start talking about creating the idea of a social compact in the classroom. And so what I started to do, rather than telling the rules, I started having a class meeting right the first or second day that we got together, and we together collectively would design the rules. Now that sounds like something that you just open yourself up for a whole lot of trouble. That's what I thought before I started doing it, but because I wanted to experiment with it, we did it, and I noticed that class after class sort of came up with the same general kind of idea. Not exactly, but in a large context, they came up with general kinds of things, like to be on time. I mean, the bells ring, they're implied, they have a message, the bells are there to help us organize our day. As dumb and stupid as that is, that's what we do. They do it all over the country, everybody's used to it. Be on time, the bell rings. Kids would say you should be on time. So that's one of the things that we would agree to. Another one would be listen when someone's talking, and that's, you know, natural, almost common sense, no deal. But kids would say that. It wasn't like they were going to make these extraordinary rules. Let's be able to throw things whenever we want to, or, you know, push kids and knock them down if we feel like it. They have a sense of what's right and what's wrong. And what Hartwood provides is the notion, instead of having to invent this whole idea from the start, it provides teachers and children with the idea of these core principles that they can use in their classroom right from the very beginning. Now, what I did was come up with the notion of a set of core principles of before I heard anything about Hartwood, that were steeped in the notions and ideas that mirrored Hartwood's work. That is to say, I would talk to kids about being honest. One of the things that we'd want to be in the classroom would be honest. And incidentally, let me just add, it's great to have children build those ethics in your class through class meetings, and I will tell you in my experience, they work. It's important and powerful to do it. But you know, you as the teacher and the leader, if something comes up in the classroom, does not come up in the classroom that would be part of your ethic or your part of your classroom agreement, you can put them in there because you're the leader, you're the boss, you get to do that. And I would say to them, say for instance, like if one of the notions that would be missing from what they wanted to be like together was honesty, I would say, well, one of the things that's important to me is honesty. And I'd like to have that as part of what we agree to do together. And so my point here is that you don't have to go searching through a lot of materials to find out what is powerful and the nature of being in the same state or principle. Those already exist with the Hartwood materials, and you could stand on them. And I would very quickly like to add that it needs to be part of the working ethic in your classroom. You need to be familiar with the stories. You need to be familiar with what honesty is yourself so that you could describe it and be it in the classroom. Loyalty, what that means and how, at the grade level you're teaching, how it applies. I go so far as to say that these wonderful rich stories are powerful ways to teach the notion in an application. But I also think that you need to put right next to, on your lesson plan, nouns, gerunds, and participles, chief export of Cambodia, whatever subject you're teaching, right next to your objective that happens to be the academic objective, I say that right next to that you write an ethical objective for that lesson as well. And you teach it. And it's a wonderful way to bring in interdisciplinary notions and ideas. That's up to you as the creator of a lesson. But I think you need to bring in the notion of that has just as much a powerful application as long division. Right next to it, I would add the notion of loyalty or love or honesty, any of the Hartwood attributes that you would include as part of that. And it's a wonderful way to make your lesson richer and talk about how that would be applying those notions and ideas. And then as a scientific teacher, you're observing your class and you notice in general, all classes, as you teach longer, and if you've been teaching for a long time, all classes assume a personality, sort of a synergistic personality that is greater than the parts of who they are. A class could be, because of 6 or 7 funny kids, it could be a really uproarious, delightful, funny class. When another class would be more serious and have less components of kids like that. But they do develop this personality. And I say that it's your responsibility to move that personality in the direction of goodness. And if you do that, using the Hartwood attributes, if you notice that your class could use some work with honesty, if there's an incident of dishonesty in the classroom, you could go right to the Hartwood attributes, pick out another story that maybe, or reread the story that you've done, and build that back into the lesson. Rather than being didactic and preaching and talking about honesty and how we should be honest, make it real, make it happen, make it as a part of your agreement that we will be honest together, and work it out in such a way. This is something that I just imagine. I don't have any scientific fact for this. But when we were less complicated as a society, it's hard for me to imagine 300 years ago, 200 years ago, and what life would be like when I'm told that most people didn't move 10 to 15 miles away from where they lived their whole lives were lived in a small circle. And that the people that they lived around were interdependent. We needed each other to get by and so forth. And those golden days, in quotes, don't exist anymore. But the same needs exist. And I have this idea or notion that we, for 300 years, have made very little progress with developing our relationships. While economies and industrial revolutions were flourishing and moving us on to a time when we could walk on the moon, that was vertical, but how we got along with each other sort of stayed the same, and it's still sort of the same today. And we still use techniques that go back, well, as far as you can look back in history. I'm reminded of the idea or notion in a tribe when a young person or an adult would violate the code or the implied agreement in that tribe or small society, they'd be banished. They would be sent to the wilderness. And if they survived the prescribed number of days, they would have the honor of working their way back into the society after having survived that. But they would never have their honor again. It would be stripped from them, and they would be in the social group with some kind of a changed perspective. Well, how's that different from us suspending kids? The notion when we suspend a kid from school is that they will go out to the edge of the herd, spend 3 days in the wilderness, and come back changed with their hat in their hand saying, please take me back into the social group, I've learned my lesson. Well, that's just stupid now. But yet, throughout a school year, no matter how long it is, literally hundreds of thousands of children are sent away. Now, here's where this gets back to the teacher's room arguments. I was never in favor of not having children be responsible for the consequences of their actions. However, where I was constantly screaming out, and still am today, yes, if a child chooses to break the agreement, cannot meet the obligations, or does not even know that they should subordinate themselves to the good of the common group, it's up to us to teach them a better way. They will learn nothing 3 days out of school. They will learn something if there's somebody there to talk to them about the choices they've made, to intervene in the conflict that they have created, and ask them to become more. Teach them a better way. I think so many of our problems are attributed to that notion that people just somehow know better and they're holding back their good behavior because they're mean. I'm saying if a child doesn't know any better, and I mean child up to the full age of 21 doesn't know any better, they are asking for a context in which they at least have an opportunity to be taught a better way. That's a tough assignment. That's what makes teaching so very, very difficult. Effective teaching may be the hardest job there is because you're teaching, working with not necessarily ready to learn children. And that changes all the time. I'm not just talking about problem kids. Kids have different issues and they change all the time. So you've got to be able to find ways of helping those who are not doing so well. And in my final analysis, as I started to mature as a teacher, I haven't lost track of when I started doing this, but I would look at my school year and feel successful based on how far I took my weakest children. The middle kids were, they didn't really need me. They had whatever it was that they were getting, whatever they needed they were really getting from the community and from home. And my relationship with them was fun and good, and it added to their lives. Kids that were prospering, they really didn't need me. I mean, we worked in a wonderful relationship and it was fun. The kids that really needed me were the kids that were so disgusting to look at after their behavior, and look into yourself and say, how am I going to help them? You know who those kids are. The kids that you say good morning to and they don't answer. The kids that you say something in order to break the ice and fill the gap in the relationship, and they have nothing to say in return. They do, though, have something in return. What they're reticent against, and what they resist is trusting you, because they have not found somebody that they believe can help them. So typically, children who aren't doing well will continue to be discouraged and not forthcoming and friendly because they don't want to be hurt, and they'll keep that back. But I watched a lot of them change as I rejected I refused to reject them, and in time, this is really maybe at some point you can look into the idea of courage as one of the attributes, because it takes tremendous courage to do that, to look past the kid's nasty, ugly behavior, as long as he's not hurting, as long as he's not hitting, but look past his rude behavior and show them in a short period of time that they can be more. And you have your subject always to intrigue them. You know, you're not, once again, you're not alone. You have your hero teacher, you have your own beliefs and values that are growing, and then you have this wonderful subject that you're teaching. And if you think your subject you're teaching is stupid, so will the kids. There's no way that you can transcend that. Just because you say a subject that you're about to introduce is important, that doesn't mean that the kids will necessarily agree. But if they trust you and you say, "Oh, this is really exciting," that's really different. It changes it. But it better be exciting, because if it's not, then you're going to lose ground again. So those are those wonderful attributes that you have from Heartwood to grow with, to add on. And I would real quick add to this that those Heartwood attributes are for you, and you're going to share that with your children. It's not for the children. It's not. You're going to just take the Heartwood attributes and give it to them as though they need to be fixed. No, you need to be those attributes. You need to be in front of them living these attributes, so that when it comes time for you to share this with them, that it'll have some substance to it. Now, I break that apart because in the elementary school, they're going to give you that. There's the children, the younger children will look at you and adore you and say, okay, yeah, these are all the things that we love, and that's good, and we love this person, so whatever they're talking about is important, and I'm going to follow them. As they get older, children are influenced by their influences are far reaching, and if you're in the category of a rude, boring adult, you're gonna have your problems with that. It's going to be difficult for you. So, you know, I sit here telling you that and realizing in the same, I take the attributes seriously. I'm still working on them. They come and go. You know, it's not something like it's not like a commodity. You move through that, and sometimes you're more courageous than others. Sometimes as a fully grown man, I'm more honest than I am at other times. But it's a process, and we work on it.
Wonderful. This is divinely inspiring.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's nice. That's nice.
Coming out
Yeah, that's great. It's wonderful.
I'm seeing a longer video down the line.
Yeah.
What about Glasser? You think we ought to get you to mention Glasser?
You know what? I will mention Glasser, but in the context I always mention him, and that is that he has done some very, very important work. I think it's, yeah, I'll mention him. I know exactly how I want to mention him.
We don't know how to ever introduce Glasser. It seems like you're the only person we know that can do that.
Yeah, I think it's important in order to build trust with any audience, as I did. I did this in this last workshop, and I simply said that I wasn't coming selling anything, that I had no package that I'd leave with. There'd be no packet that you'd be asked to buy. I represent ideas. One of the great ideas that I discovered that I want to share with you is this idea of behavior, the control of perception. And the notion of behavior, the control of perception, being a psychology, being so new, so different, it just rails against the common sense notion that we've all been taught in psychology classes, and by our day-to-day experience. The notion that stimulus response psychology, stimulus response behaviorism is the way of the world. That's the way the world moves. I was just reading in the papers recently about test scores, and if teachers were held more accountable, the test scores would go up, and if they weren't, then they would be punished for it. This is classic stimulus response administrative approach that hadn't worked, and it's not going to work. If stimulus response worked, it'll work by now. And we'd say, okay, this is the way that we need to go with the way we build our relationships. That's what's so dangerous about it. That in stimulus response, do it or I'll hurt you psychology, it says, I'm the keeper of what's true. In order for you to get what I think you should have, you have to prove it to me, and if you do, I'll reward you. If you don't, I'll punish you. And that I can manipulate you into becoming something that I think you should be. I just don't think that's true. I just absolutely now just think that that's not the way things work. Having said that, that's fine if I would just say that's not the way things go, that's not how we behave, or that's a flawed theory of behavior, unless you include another theory. And the theory of behavior, the control of perception, simply says that nothing we ever do is ever caused by something that happens outside of us. All of our behavior is internally motivated by a set of basic needs, psychological needs, and one of them is to survive. We want to stay alive, and we will find ways to do that. The others are belonging, a sense of belonging, a sense of some efficacy or personal power, freedom in the context of choices and limits, but we all want to be free to make choices, and fun. Fun is probably the least respected notion in education. But if you just look to your own life, fun is a super motivator. It's one that you'll do again and again because it was fun, and that's all the real evidence you need, or the reason that you need to go ahead and do it. Or else we wouldn't have summer vacations. We wouldn't have people flying to France. We wouldn't have people traveling all over the world. Or we wouldn't have people just going to amusement parks. There's no point to an amusement park. I mean, while you're at an amusement park, you don't say to yourself, well, I'm coming to the amusement park because I want to go from one side of the amusement park to the other, and that's what we do, like a lesson plan said, beginning and end. When you go to an amusement park, you just go there, and you're there naturally having fun. And I think the notion of fun in the classroom is absolutely critical. It's not always essential, but it is a critical element. And how you can design it to be fun is up to you. That's your responsibility as a master teacher. Nobody can tell you that. But a good thing that I always used was, when I was creating a lesson, I would ask myself, would I enjoy this if someone said do this? And if I didn't, I'd change it. But if I was convinced that it was going to be fun or a really cool idea, and I believed in it, I'd do it. And then I'd watch things happen. I'd still observe it. Maybe I was wrong. Maybe it was not, maybe it was stupid. An example of that in my own class would be, since I taught metalsmithing, I would have a free choice to say to the kids, all right, one of the required projects for this semester is cufflinks. Well, nobody wears cufflinks anymore. Nobody I know, anyway. And so if I went to them and said, okay, but you're gonna, if you don't have that, then if you don't make cufflinks, then you're not going to have a passing grade. I mean, right away we're in an adversary relationship. But if I'd go to them and say, instead of cufflinks, and I had to do some thinking, well, what would be fun? I'd say, well, a lesson that here's what we're going to do. And, a man comes to the door and knocks. He has a hood on. You can't see who it is. And he says, I've come to you because I understand that you're a master craftsman and you can create small containers. And from under his huge coat, under which he has wings underneath those coat, and you can see that the wings are just protruding. He pulls out a small bag, a leather bag, and there's a bottle in there, and he says, In this bottle is the sacred elixir of life, and I've come to you to make me a break-proof container out of metal for this. I'll be back in 3 weeks. Please have it ready when I come back. Well, that sure beats cufflinks. Maybe you even want to make one of those bottles. I bet you I could convince you to do it. But it's a whole lot different than saying you're going to do cufflinks, shut up, do it or I'll hurt you. It's a matter of having fun. And then bring in all the notions of tonics and sacred elixirs and what they've meant throughout history and how people use those magical ideas and what magic is and so forth. And that's fun. And if you don't believe it, come to my class and I'll show you. I'll teach you. So.
And even the sun is cooperating.
Yeah, yeah. Now, I didn't get to Glasser. I didn't mention Glasser's name. All right, I forgot that the thing's still rolling. But I say, see, Glasser taught us, see, I think like if we mention the biggest thing, I said this thing, it was really successful. Actually, I stole the line from Glasser on one of his videos. Are we still rolling here? Yeah. Glasser talked about this idea. I wrote this article after he said this, just because I thought it was cool. Glasser was talking about stimulus response psychology in a little tape that he had done, and he said, what would happen if Pavlov, instead of using a dog for his saliva experiments, used a cat? Well, I thought that was magic. Just the idea. That was such a powerful idea. The whole image. Yeah, what if he actually used a cat? We would never know about it. He wouldn't write it down. He wouldn't tell us, cat scratched me and mauled my head as he vaulted out the laboratory window. And Glasser went on to say that Pavlov got the Nobel Prize for that. He said, obviously, the standard for the Nobel Prize was a lot less than it is now. I just love that idea. And Pavlov calls a press conference and arrests modern man's thinking about psychology for the next 120 years. So when you look at that idea of paradigm busting, what I'm saying about the notion of psychology and how we behave is such a huge difference in the paradigm. That is to say that I could make you do something if I threaten you or reward you, and that's how our system is based, on that flawed thinking from my point of view. And you change it to this notion of building relationships that foster and support these human emotional needs that are built in all of us: belonging, power, freedom, and fun. That paradigm, those two different models are as different as the way we drive our cars in the United States as compared to the way people in Great Britain drive their cars. It's that different. They drive on the different side of the road than we do, and all that goes with it, all the details and all the notions and all the infrastructure of their highways and how they interact on the road is different. That's how different the notion of behavior, the control of perception psychology is from stimulus response psychology. And I urge you to look into that as an educator. That's knowledge that's available to you. Once again, I did not learn this in a university study course. I learned it as a teacher researcher, finding, desperately wanting to find better ways of being with my children, and it's available to you. I read it and behaved accordingly, and improved my teaching life and the lives of my students since I started practicing those ideas. What was missing, though, was this heartwood notion, the idea of beyond the psychological needs of belonging, power, freedom, and fun, which are a very solid soil on which to build the notions of being with other humans. The attributes, the heartwood attributes, provide a solid footer cast in the concrete of that soil that you can stand on and build your practice on that. build your principled practice on that. And I think you need not ever concern yourself about whether or not these notions or ideas are appropriate. You could do your own research, stand on a street corner at any major city and ask somebody, are you in favor of honesty? Even the dishonest will say, I'm in favor of it. Everybody's in favor of honesty. Nobody is against it. Very few people that I ever talked to would say, courage is something that should never be practiced. Most everybody will be in favor of courage. It's good to be courageous. It's hard to be courageous. But these are not fancy ideas that some people in some small little think tank somewhere put together and said these are things that people should know. This is the history of mankind. This is what it is to be human. It crosses all boundaries and languages. All languages have words for courage. Listen to this wonderful quote this is a wonderful quote. I haven't memorized this, but I will. This is by Thomas Jefferson, and it speaks directly to the things that I've been talking about. And you know how when you discover something that lines up with what you believe, you love it, you know, you think it's so powerful. Well, Thomas Jefferson said this, I know of no safe depository of the ultimate powers of society but the people themselves. And if we think them not enlightened enough to exercise their control with wholesome discretion, the remedy is not to take it from them, but to inform their discretion. Informing their discretion has become a phrase that drives my thinking when I'm with kids, with children, informing their discretion. That says so much. It says you're going to inform their choices. These are the choices. If you're going to inform their choices, it implies limits of some sort. This rather than this. I'm thinking about an image like when I go to the eye doctor, and maybe you've been there, and the doctor says, this or this? Is this better than this? You know, and he flicks those things back and forth. That's actually what you're doing with children. You know, their spiritual and emotional health is seen through the lenses called you, and you're asking them, is this better than this? And when they transgress or go outside the limits, they need you more than ever. So when something happens that, when you have an agreement in the classroom and something goes wrong, you have this third party that I talked about in the relationship. You, the other person in this relationship piece, and the agreement becomes the third entity in the relationship. And you can say to them, is what you're doing against the rules? They'll typically say, I don't know. Or they'll try to avoid. They'll see, this is one of the skills that kids that aren't doing well with social skills, they say this, was what you're doing against the rules, Charlotte? And she'll say, he pushed me. He took my pencil. Won't even answer the question. Avoid completely. Deny that there is an agreement in the first place. And you ask again, was what you were doing against the rule? Finally, she'll begin to see by just interrogatories rather than telling, rather than by didactic preaching, asking a question. When you did this, was that against our agreement? And they'll eventually say, yeah. They won't be real forthcoming with it, you know, but they'll see. If you get them apart from everybody else and have a private conversation, this only takes seconds. That'll just be magic with how you're with them. And then you get to say this. Well, let's say, for instance, she doesn't say, I didn't do it, I wasn't doing it. You finally say, because you're the keeper of the agreement, you're the referee, the referee, you refer to the classroom agreement. You finally say to him or her, well, let me tell you something. I saw you. And remember I said I won't tolerate injustice? Here's the time now. I saw you, and it was unjust. Now here's where you're different than everybody else. Up to then, everything's sort of like lots of people do that. But what you say is, in the next few minutes, if you're willing, would you be willing to work with a little plan so we can stop that and begin something else? And they don't know what that means generally, because nobody ever asks them that. And you don't want to make a plan that's like 2 weeks long. You don't want to make a 3-month plan. You just simply want the child to stop doing what it was that she was doing or he was doing that transgressed on your agreement and get them to find a better way. So you just ask them, what can we do in the next 10 minutes that would avoid that circumstance? And you help them find a better way. Make a little plan up. It's classic. The kid then does it, and you get to say to them, you don't want to praise them and patronize them, but you simply say after the last 5 minutes or on their way out to lunch or to a recess, you simply say to them, I know you could do that. That's excellent. Good job. So, but keep the good jobs down. I mean, I hear a lot of that good job. See, there's another thing, self-esteem bugaboo has just killed us. Everybody wants to talk about self-esteem and how powerful and important. I'll just ask you directly, how's your self-esteem? I'll bet you it's great. I just look at you right now, I'll tell you, you don't have a self-esteem problem. You think you're great now because that's built in. That's who we are. We can't think otherwise. Self-esteem is part of survival and part of belonging, power, freedom, and fun. But what we are not very often is effective. We're not always choosing the best behaviors that will help us work well together with others. And so rather than the self-esteem idea that is just way too pervasive and doesn't teach us anything, I think about building confidence through accomplishments. If you want to feel good about yourself, do something worthwhile to help somebody else and watch it grow. Now there's something you can be proud about to yourself. But then again, there's also this notion you don't be a jerk about it. You know, people don't respect if you walk up to them and say, guess what I just did? I just helped the blind. You know, I mean, you got to keep that in perspective for yourself. But it's its own best reward. And that's the notion that you want to help children understand, that they have an obligation. The word obligation, I love to use obligation all the time because so few people talk about it. You have an obligation in a classroom. If you come into a classroom as a student, depending on the age, on the grade level, but you do have an obligation. This is not free. Whatever you're doing here is not free. It's not free for me and it's not free for you. And so your obligations are to subordinate yourself to a few simple rules. There are people here that pay the taxes for you. If you're in a public school or in a private school, somebody's paying your tuition, that is real currency. And your obligation is to honor that and act accordingly. And by being disruptive and in the context of our general agreement, if you're not subordinating yourself to those few simple rules, we need to talk about that. So you have an obligation. My obligation is to help you become more. Your obligation is to listen to me when I speak to you. I'll do the work of making it be important when I talk. And that's sort of the idea. I always held children responsible for the notion of what they were about to do. I'm distracted by that fly.
That's good. Mm-hmm. Excellent.
Are we done?
No, I wanted a little bit about the parents packing the baggage.
Right, we haven't really talked about what you mean by ready to learn.
Do you think do you think we should get him to talk about this idea of the bulldozer or the whatever that is?
Well, I think
to have a little conversation because but what about just a little bit, just in case we're trying to promote his comic book?
Yeah, we are, but we're going to actually put some of those images in there. I mean, I don't know. Do you think?
I think it's best if the material speaks for itself based on.
Talk about the gap.
Okay,
yeah.
Status for the gap, and I think then the pieces there.
Tell me more about this ready-to-learn notion.
Well, the social skills, about the suitcases.
Oh, okay. That's we didn't do that. Okay.
You just haven't sort of unpacked that.
Yeah, so to speak.
That you're talking to parents just for a minute, and
Yeah.
what their responsibilities are.
Right.
And the teachers shouldn't feel totally guilty if they fail a child, because really the parents have to pack the bags. So maybe you can put that in too. I mean, teachers feel really bad, but sometimes, kids come with unpacked bags.
Well, I think that's a really good question about the notion of teachers feeling guilty about not being successful with children. And I have to tell you that my last 15 years of teaching, I never really felt unsuccessful with a child. That's because, as I said earlier, I was judging my best performance based how far I took my weakest kids. Now, some of those kids, grant you, didn't go real far, but they did move. They were more than they were when they came. And I could tell that in a lot of different ways. The problem comes is when we feel so inundated with external standards. You know, so many of my colleagues, and rightly so, point out the fact that all of these are wonderful ideas and that they agree with them and that they even are that. But there's this other notion of the external standard of standardized tests and how they feel pulled apart. They feel an obligation to the child in the relationship, but that the standards of preset, predetermined standards drive a stake that separates them. Because at some point then, who does the teacher really represent? Do they represent the child or the standard? I'll say this, that if you're not representing the child, it's not the position that you should be in. The standards need to be floated. Any teacher that is taught for any length of time realizes that an external standard imposed by outside forces or sources can be ignored. I mean, the classroom door closes and you become who you are. You're autonomous. I think that that's wrong, but that's the way the system is right now. I'm asking teachers, generally speaking, not to ignore standards, but at the very least, float the standard to meet the child's individual needs. You need to do that as a artistic/scientific teacher. You've got to know where the child is as a learner in order to apply learning, remedial learning circumstances so the kid can become more. Now, if you do that, I think the big pictures of standards will take care of themselves. But you need to address first the idea of building a relationship, and then begin the very difficult creative work of artistically teaching what sometimes is not very exciting stuff. So the challenge is for teachers in general to take what it is that they must do. A curriculum is noble and it's good. I mean, it's there for a purpose. Not many have thought this far about it, but parents and teachers, let me say this very quickly, that this is my own point of view, and I represent nothing more than my own point of view here, but it's considered and studied. That curriculum comes to us since states are responsible for education in our country. Curriculum comes from state departments of education by experts over many, many years considering what's worth knowing. That's what curriculum is. It is a package of learning that is designated to be important enough to be instituted and applied in all the schools in the state. So from the state level, they say English, both writing, speaking, is what we will teach in class. History, geography, these are important things, and these become curricular issues. The arts, music, science, all of those things become curriculum. And so as a teacher, you are not free to invent your own curriculum of learning. Because you think that it's very, very, very cool and you happen to like the notion of baking cookies, if you're an English teacher, you can work in cookies into teaching English, but you cannot make baking cookies the purpose of your course. That's something that's given to us. Having said that, parents need to know that there are not many choices that teachers have when it comes to applying their curriculum. I mean, they have, and rightly so, steps to go through and things to cover, so to speak. Because, in essence, mathematics, English, social studies, academic subjects in general, are interrelated. They need to be progressive in their learning process. They are connected. But beyond that, teachers are reminded that you are very, very, very free to be as creative as you choose to be and need to be. So teachers have to be aware of that, and should be aware of that. Now then, the other idea that I think this is the single biggest problem we face in education, both public and private. Huge assumptions are made by teachers about the children that come to them in terms of their readiness socially. Because you're in the 3rd grade, because you're in your 7th grade, because you're in the 8th grade, teachers make assumptions about who children are socially when they come to them. Then they go through the process of discovering how wrong they are in September. And in October, they're in a chaotic maze and very often don't know how to get out of it except by expelling the dedicated disruptor out of their class, getting rid of them. I'm saying that teachers can't make those assumptions and that parents have an obligation, at the very least, to teach their children that when they go to school, they must subordinate some of their desire to do anything they want, anytime they want to do it. They need to teach them that at home. Having said that, we know that there are parents in a free society, in a culture that we live in, that don't necessarily think that's important, or they don't do it. They don't teach them anything about subordinating any of their, satisfying any of their immediate needs till later, delaying gratification. They just don't do it. So when that happens, when parents, I'm not blaming, I'm not saying, that's just the way that is. Some parents don't do that. But those children, because of compulsory attendance laws, must come to school. They go to school. Ready or not, here I come. So I think parents, when they drop the ball on teaching basic social responsibility, in a small sense, they give up their family sovereignty by not doing that. And they say, well, I either haven't, I don't know how, or I'm not going to. But when they send a child to school, that's their obligation. The child must begin, that's the obligation of school, to teach them those fundamental social skills. And in a classroom, from my point of view, children come to a classroom, every child comes to a classroom with 2, in the beginning, empty suitcases. When they start kindergarten, they're empty. One is academic bag, the other is a social skill bag. It would be wonderful if the social skill bag was packed at home in the community. The community and the home are responsible for packing the social skill bag. But we know that that doesn't happen. And when it's not packed, the community and the family are saying, or the parents are saying, I haven't done it. The kid's coming anyway. Why don't you go ahead and help him pack that social skills bag? And teachers have to realize that, yeah, if that's the case, we're going to have to help them begin packing that social skills bag. Now, however you do that, this explains why in some schools in the country, the academic bag is never packed, and that the social skill bag is never addressed, because they don't even know that they're carrying 2 bags. All they do is try to make some chaos get some order out of chaos, and in the process, they lose so many kids, and nobody leaves with a packed bag, academic or social skill bag. And the problem then is that those children become members of our society by default, and then they do the best they can and end up in trouble very often and become a problem for you and me. So the notion that my classroom was an airline service on which every child every day had must carry on 2 bags. They were going to go on that flight every day, and that I would have to check out their social skill bag by observing who they were, how they reacted, and what the circumstances were, and then customize their social skills, the learning of their social skills whenever needed to help them pack that bag, was really an important issue. And I need not tell you the importance of that. in our culture today, where teamwork, where people are quality circles, where people are becoming more involved in constructing communities that are powerful and viable. We need people that have social skills, that are able to get along, be able to address the notions and ideas of what it is to be together. And although this is not a favorite topic of mine, because I don't think that schools exist to teach people how to become good workers in a economic system, this is a passion of mine. I believe that our strength in the United States is creativity and improvisation. That's who we are. That's what we've become. And the degree that we don't take advantage of that strength and stifle that creativity and the ability to improvise is the degree to which we will not evolve. Because each of us in the aggregate form this culture that is so viable, it's so strong, so powerful and creative. And we need all of our members to be contributing to that. The way we contribute most often is to go to a workplace. And in a workplace, you could be the brightest, most gifted, score the highest on your SAT, summa cum laude, have a doctor's degree, and not know how to say, hey, how you doing? What's your name? I'm glad to meet you. Can we have lunch together today? Why don't we get to know each other a little bit better? If you could have all the academic skills in the world, be able to solve problems and can't be with somebody else, you're really of no value. You're really of no value. Now, in some circumstances, and maybe in the technological field, you'll sit alone at your own CRT the whole day and not really need to have those social skills and get away with that. But even in that high-tech field, in order to be creative, groupthink is necessary. Creativity, improvisation, a high tolerance for ambiguity, absolutely essential. And when we talk about that, where does that come from? Does that come from rote learning? Does that come from do it all or I'll hurt you? Does it come from stick to the curriculum, we've got to cover this material? Or does it come from what I believe is the soul of a free society, and that is the gifted teachers that are part of that that pass on those notions and ideas to others in the culture. Whew, I got to go in there in a second. Oh, goodness.
All right.
I wanted to say that for a long time. Yeah.
That is wonderful. Oh,
but that idea of improvisation and creativity, let the culture do that. Let the people create that. Yeah, you can't force that. You can't make that happen any more than you could prescribe jazz. You say, oh, I've got a notion or idea that a country could use. Jazz. They need jazz. Let's sit now and create jazz. No, it came from the hearts of people and what it was to be free in a context that can happen. No other country, not that you compare, but it was natural that jazz would come from a place like America, and we would prosper. Yeah, or that the
culture, I mean, it has all those elements of all those other cultures.
Yeah.
Woven together.
There's 15 minutes left in this thing.
Okay, we just want you to talk a little bit about where you're coming from. Just your, your career and, right? Who's Steve Korpa?
I had this wonderful notion, this wonderful thing that got me that took place and evolved, talking about creativity and improvisation. That I'm in a wonderful position of having lived the life I designed. I didn't anticipate it and make out step-by-step solid plans, but from my earliest memories of elementary school back to and including kindergarten, I was made aware of the notion that I could draw, or I could paint, or that I could make stuff. I remember my kindergarten teacher swooning over this painting I did of my mom at the laundry line, hanging clothes. I could still see it. And she thought I was special. And she passed that notion on through to my other elementary school teachers. And I became like the school artist. I was the art guy. I was the art. This has to do with the notion of efficacy, the notion of the context in which I was living my very young life, being effective. rather than self-esteem, I had this confidence that came from my elementary school teachers thinking enough of me and my burgeoning art skills to encourage me to become more. And my parents did too. I remember when I was real little, my mother and father caught on to the notion because I was always drawing, and they made paper readily available to me. Always like reams of paper were around, and crayons and pencils and stuff like that. And so I became that art lover kid that loved to draw, you know, whatever notions I had back then. I just remember how wonderful it was to be able to draw things and then have people say it was really nice and look at it and say, yeah, it is pretty good, I'm good, so let's go on with that. So that was the beginning of the forging of my principles of knowing success and efficacy, and then going all the way through school, being involved in creating art class and making more. So when it came to time to go on to school, my art teacher suggested that I go on to art school, and it made sense. I didn't know if I was going to be able to, I didn't think about art as a career. I didn't know what art careers were. But he said, you know, that you might want to combine your art with teaching and go to this school. So I went to Edinboro and received a wonderful undergraduate experience, art education there. And I decided, well, I'd be a teacher. Teaching something like, seems like something I'd like. And as it turned out, because of the influence of my early teachers and my wonderfully warm mother and father, I had this container that I called back then a teacher's heart that could be filled, that I could put things in it that would allow it to become more. So I started that way, and then when I graduated, I was going to teach, and I thought that I'd teach in the town Pittsburgh that I grew up in. And when I went to interview for a job, they said, the place that you went to high school is open, you know, you can teach there. But what we want you to do is start in elementary school first, and then you can go up to the high school after a couple of years. And I was sort of disappointed in that, but they said that that's the way they were going to hire me. So I said, okay, I'll do it. And I was just never forgot, was I ever so grateful for having them insist that I teach in elementary school first. So I taught there for 5 years, and then I went up to Carrick High School and taught at the school I graduated from. So in a sense, I lived my life, like I mentioned earlier before, in a small little 7-mile radius. I never left that and stayed there, had a great sensitivity to the community, and went back. And later, when I was reading Joseph Campbell, he defined the hero's journey as separation, initiation, and return. And after I didn't know it at the time, and I didn't read Campbell till maybe 15 years ago, started reading ideas of myth and mythology. But I realized that I had actually taken the hero's journey in a sense, that I had separated myself from my home, gone on to college, was initiated in the ways of the artistic/academic world, and then I returned back to the place where I started. But I never did believe that Campbell meant literally return to the place. You return. You go back. You go back to the culture. You go back somehow and return and give the gifts that you accumulate. That's what heroes do. And the notion of heroic journeys are important to me. I also think that we as teachers and parents need to take on the mantle of hero ourselves. I'm always interested when I watch a firefighter or a person who has saved someone's life or a circumstance, and they say, well, what's it like to be a hero? And the hero always is reluctant to take on the mantle. And I'm always coaching him off to the side on the top. He says, just go ahead and admit it, you're a hero, it's okay. It's a good, noble thing to be a hero. You don't ever want to say, yeah, I'm a hero, because it sounds self-serving. But I think you need to recognize that acting and behaving heroically is a source of great emotional nutrition, and that we could take pride in that, quiet pride, and there's pride that has to do with bringing goodness and richness to others. Is not vanity. It is not something that you have to feel guilty about. I think a quiet pride in who you've become and how you help others is what it is to be human, and we should pass that on.
Any last words for the aspiring teachers here?
Well,
10 minutes left.
one of the questions that is asked is, what do you have any notion or inspirational words for teachers that are going to be teachers or aspiring to be teachers? And I think the answer lies in the word itself, inspiration. To be inspired is to be in the spirit of. It actually has its root in the nation of respiration or breathing. And to be in the spirit of, when you are going to be a teacher, in order to inspire you, or to be inspired, you have to contact yourself. You have to put yourself in contact with notions and ideas that are bigger than you. And that's the constant challenge. Sort of to maintain, I often thought about it as a good visual. Back when I was a kid watching early television, there were variety shows, and occasionally there'd be like jugglers. And jugglers would come on, and they'd do this one trick where they had dishes on sticks. And I remember, like, one on Ed Sullivan's show, this one guy had like 10 dishes spinning. And then as you started the next one, the last one, the first one you started was sort of like getting slower, so you'd run back over there and spin that one again. Well, let me tell you something. That's like what really it is when the classroom's working. That's what you're doing. You're really keeping all those plates spinning, and they're all going, and one's going to start slowing down, the other one's going to start doing. Rather than seeing that as like so impossible and so daunting, and it is, see it as the challenge. See it as what you do, because if you could see it that way, you could draw great strength from it. And you need to be talking to others who are like you. When you go into a school, I don't give advice, but this is, I would suggest this, that you be a silent observer for as long as you can maintain silence, and watch. Because if you start speaking too soon as a first-year teacher, people will begin to categorize you as a radical or as somebody who's another one of those liberals. Let me say something about liberal education. I think we get such a bad rap. Liberal education, in its essence, to have an education in the liberal arts, in its essence means to be freed from a domination of others, literally to be liberated. So if you're associated with ideas that are radical, maybe even seen by others to be conservative or liberal. Conservative, I'm a conservative in the sense that I conserve those issues and important things that are worth conserving, like principles, like values, like values that we commonly agree to. But I'm also a liberal when it comes to absolutely living and behaving and acting accordingly to those notions and ideas of personal responsibility and being free from the domination of others. So hold your silence for as long as possible and observe. And you will hear coming out of the mouths of the colleagues you teach with ideas that you agree with and light a fire in you, and ideas that you would say, that's not me, I don't want to be like that. And as soon as you feel comfortable, move to the people that you think are going to be most like you in your beliefs, that can support you, and get strength from them. But you need to make the first move with that very often, because teachers, generally speaking, assume that you're going to be pretty much on your own. That's one of the things about teaching that is changing, that there are mentors now that help you, but your mentor could be somebody that could help you, and it could also be somebody that may not be very helpful. So look to find informed thinkers that you can trust. Maybe you don't even like their thoughts sometimes, but somebody you can respect, somebody that's open-minded. And then I think that's a practical kind of idea. But never go into the classroom without knowing that you don't go there alone. Always think of the notion, especially in the beginning. I know that I never stopped, it never got easier for me. And that's not meant to discourage you. It always got more and more difficult. the challenge of September was always daunting for me. But I think you need to listen to people who have had lunch duty, who have had bus duty, and ask them about that. You need to ask teachers that have actually improved and ask them how they did it. And also, I think you should think through who you are as a teacher, what you stand for, and don't be discouraged by your early performances. It is a process, and teaching is a science and an art, and if it's going to be a science at all, you must observe yourself. You must, just as in good scientific method, create a thesis for learning, teaching, and how you're going to go about doing it. Plan the experiment, put the experiment into action, and most importantly, observe your results and compile the data for future use, either in memory or in notes. A journal's a good idea. If you're not a journal keeper, you might think about starting to keep a little journal notebook about your first couple years, and then after about 5 years, go back and really take a look at your first years, and there will be no doubt in my mind, if you track your own improvement and always choose to improve and become more, accentuate and do more of the things that work, limit the things that don't, you will constantly improve, and you'll be on your way to a wonderful career that no one could really ever describe the joy that you could get from that, having been with children and changing children and having them become more, and in the biggest sense, help the community in general become more. You won't be thanked for it very often, but that's not why you got in it in the first place. Your thanks comes from various phone calls or a letter or somebody that'll see you in the street and remember you and talk to you. Those are the small little moments that are beyond the paycheck and mean everything to a teacher that calls himself a teacher with a capital T. And so, as I started out, I said, there is no teaching until the student is brought into the same state or principle in which you are. A transformation does take place. In that instant, he is you and you are he. Then is it teaching, and by no unfriendly chance or bad company can he ever lose the benefit.